You know that feeling? You see someone online, maybe a friend, constantly saving posts of these incredibly chic, expensive French fragrances, beautiful artisanal tableware.
Oh yeah, the curated aspirational lifestyle feed.
Totally. It's all filling up their saved folders. But then the next thing you hear is they just place this massive order for like discount tissues and a new electric blanket on Pinduoduo.
Right, the contrast.
A friend of mine actually put it perfectly. She said, I feel spiritually middle class, but my life doesn't always reflect it.
That phrase really nails it.
And that really hits at the core of what we're exploring with you today.
Mm.
This fascinating and honestly increasingly significant consumer mindset in China that's being called the spiritually middle class.
Yeah, and what's so interesting for you to consider here is how the digital world lets people construct an identity that doesn't always neatly align with their actual purchasing behavior.
Right. It's not about a specific income bracket then.
Not primarily, no. It's more about the self-image people are building and sharing through their online interactions. Platforms become these spaces where, the desire for a certain lifestyle can be explored, expressed.
Like projecting an ideal self.
Exactly. Projecting an ideal self, finding a sense of connection, maybe validation online too.
It's a real paradox, though, isn't it, when you really think about it?
It is.
This strong online desire for a particular lifestyle clashing with what often turns into a much more pragmatic and, let's face it, often price-sensitive approach when it's actually time to buy something.
And that disconnect, well, it presents a genuine challenge for anyone trying to really understand the Chinese consumer market today.
Absolutely. We just can't rely on those older, maybe more straightforward assumptions anymore.
No, definitely not.
The sources we've been looking at really dive into this complex reality, and our mission today is basically to help you understand this phenomenon and, crucially, its implications if you're trying to connect with consumers in China.
So, okay, if you're a marketer, this immediately brings up a pretty critical question.
Which is?
Well, if all that online engagement with aspirational content doesn't automatically translate into sales, how do brands effectively navigate that?
Yeah, how do you bridge that gap?
You might have a brand that's built this really sophisticated, engaging online presence, beautiful content, lots of likes.
Mm-hmm.
But then they find themselves in direct competition with the huge discounts and group buying deals that platforms like Pinduoduo really thrive on.
It's almost like consumers are speaking one language online, the language of this aspirational, spiritually middle class.
Right.
But then when they're actually ready to make a purchase, they switch to a completely different vocabulary, one that's much more focused on price, on value for money.
Exactly. And what you might find particularly interesting is that this isn't just limited to one specific income group or segment.
Oh, really? It's brighter than that.
Yeah, our sources highlight similar kinds of contradictions across different demographics. Take Gen Z, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
They might show incredible loyalty, even high spending, towards a virtual idol they follow.
Right, I've seen that.
Yet, at the same time, they're meticulously tracking every single penny they spend on their budget-friendly breakfast. It's that duality again.
So that internal contradiction, that's becoming more common.
It seems so.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at the bigger picture for you, these kinds of seemingly contradictory behaviors are popping up across almost all consumer segments in China.
Like what else?
Well, you might see really strong brand loyalty in some, say, mass market segments,
Okay.
existing right alongside a real willingness to just switch platforms in a heartbeat if it means snagging a better deal somewhere else.
Ah, so loyalty isn't absolute.
Not when price talks, often. This really underscores that those traditional linear ways of segmenting consumers, just looking at demographics like income, where they live, age, gender.
Standard boxes.
Exactly, the standard boxes. They're becoming less and less reliable predictors of actual behavior. Even the same individual can approach buying things with very different logic, depending on the situation, their mood, the specific moment.
That makes sense. Context is key, which I guess leads us to this important idea of what our sources are calling the multifaceted consumer.
Precisely. It's moving away from thinking about a single, consistent consumer persona with predictable preferences
And moving towards...
towards understanding this multi-role behavior.
Yeah.
People are constantly shifting between different identities, almost like wearing different hats.
Okay.
And their preferences shift accordingly, depending on the context they find themselves in at that moment.
Can you give an example of that? It sounds a bit abstract.
Sure. What's fascinating for you to consider is this example of a single user, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in one context, maybe when they're researching beauty products, they act like a highly informed skincare geek. Super meticulous, checking ingredients, reading detailed
Got
reviews.
it. Deep dive mode.
Exactly. But then, maybe later that day when it comes to ordering takeout for dinner, they might completely switch gears. They become a hardcore price hacker, only ordering if they have a significant discount coupon.
Okay. Total switch.
Total switch. And then, in yet another scenario, maybe grabbing coffee, they might be someone who really values the brand aesthetic, the whole experience of a certain cafe.
The vibe matters there.
The vibe matters. But then, maybe when buying home appliances, they become a fiercely patriotic buyer, specifically seeking out local Chinese brands.
Wow. Okay. So one person, multiple buying personalities.
Exactly. It really paints a picture of a consumer who isn't this single unified entity. They're a dynamic decision maker, and their choices are heavily, heavily shaped by the specific situation.
Right. And it gets even more layered, doesn't it? With this idea of multi-price point purchasing, even within the same product category.
Yes, that's another crucial layer for you to grasp. It's not just about, occasionally trying out a cheaper option to see if it's okay.
It's more deliberate than that.
It seems to be becoming a more structured way of buying. Someone might regularly use, say, more budget-friendly cosmetics for their everyday work routine.
Okay, the daily grind stuff.
Right. But then they consciously reserve the more luxurious high-end items for special occasions, or maybe when they're going out wanting to feel a certain way.
So it's a conscious diversification, driven by the scenario, maybe their emotional state too.
Exactly. Scenario and emotion seem to be key drivers there. It's not random. It's structured diversity in their purchasing.
This raises a really big question then, doesn't it?
Go on.
Can our current methods for understanding consumers, market research, can they even keep pace with this level of dynamic, layered behavior?
Well, it's a really important point you raise. Are the traditional surveys, the focus groups, are they truly capturing all these nuances?
It feels like they might miss a lot.
There's a real critique in our sources about relying too heavily on static segmentation, using those fixed demographic labels like, urban elite or rational mom.
Yeah, those feel a bit outdated maybe.
In today's China, those labels are becoming increasingly oversimplified and, frankly, less and less useful for you if you're trying to genuinely understand motivations.
It's like trying to fit this constantly shifting, fluid reality into these very rigid boxes. It just doesn't work anymore.
True, nicely. Our sources give a compelling example. Think about someone who could be projecting a very polished professional image on a platform like Redone.
Okay, very curated.
Very curated. Then they seamlessly transition to being a super thrifty parent hunting for deals on Pinduoduo.
Right.
And then maybe later that same day, they indulge in some premium shopping on Tmall. And this could all happen within like a single 24-hour period.
Wow, all the same person.
All the same person. So the way you need to think about consumer insight is definitely evolving.
How so?
Shifting away from that older idea of just classifying people into neat, static categories. That's too simple now.
So what's the alternative?
It's increasingly becoming about decoding, like being a detective almost, trying to piece together these seemingly scattered clues
From where?
from their various online behaviors, the different platforms they use, the narratives they construct about themselves online. It's about reading between the lines of all these different interactions.
Okay, so decoding instead of just classifying. I like that. But if these more traditional marketing approaches, the segmentation, maybe even the classic frameworks, are struggling, what kind of solutions are our sources suggesting? How do businesses cope?
Well, there's a strong emphasis on the need for a new kind of systems thinking.
Systems thinking, what does that mean in this context?
It's not just about acknowledging that consumers are complex. That's the easy part, maybe. It's about actually building business systems, operational systems that can function effectively within that complexity for you.
Ah, okay, so it's about the how, not just the what.
That's a crucial distinction for you to understand, yes. While foundational marketing frameworks, think of the classic 4Ps or maybe the 4Cs, they still hold some value, right? They provide some basic structure.
Sure, product, price, place, promotion.
Right. But their inherently linear nature doesn't really capture the multi-dimensional ecosystem we're all navigating now.
Things are just more complicated.
Way more complicated. The landscape has expanded dramatically.
Right.
We have these highly differentiated platform ecosystems, each with its own rules and culture. We have fragmented content distribution channels, interaction design that's heavily influenced by emotion. And then there's the critical importance of timing, the specific scenario a consumer is in, even the overall rhythm of their decision-making process. That's a lot more variables.
And I know there have been attempts to update those models, right, to account for this complexity.
Yes, absolutely. Our sources mention, for example, Koichi Shimizu's 7 Cs model.
What does that add?
It expands on the traditional 4 Cs by adding elements like communication, cost, which is broader than just price convenience, customer desires and needs, co-creation with customers, and marketing collaboration.
So trying to be more holistic, more customer-centric.
Exactly. It's definitely an acknowledgement that marketing needs to encompass much more today for you.
Okay, but does just adding more C's or more dimensions solve the core problem?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
While these expanded models offer valuable insights for you, they also highlight a very real practical issue.
Right.
Marketing systems can become incredibly bloated, fragmented, and just operationally overwhelming when there's an attempt to cover every single possible dimension, every platform, every scenario.
Right, it becomes unmanageable.
Exactly. Each platform can feel like it demands a completely tailored approach.
Yeah.
Every potential consumer mood or situation might seem to require a unique response. And if you don't have a clear underlying structural framework,
Things fall apart.
marketing teams can easily lose their strategic focus. And ultimately, brands can lose control of their overall message, their identity, in your eyes, the consumer's eyes.
It's like trying to juggle far too many balls at once. Eventually, something's going to get dropped. And the consequence is what? Marketing efforts that are just chaotic.
Potentially, yes. You can end up with marketing that's not only operationally exhausting, but also lacks that crucial strategic coherence that actually resonates with you. It becomes noise.
Okay, so the suggestion here isn't just to keep adding more dimensions, more complexity to our marketing thinking.
No, it's more fundamental than that. It's about actually reconsidering and maybe reconfiguring the fundamental structure itself for you, how the whole system is organized.
Reconfiguring the structure, how would that work?
One example concept that came up is this idea of a gravitational structure.
Gravitational structure. Okay, tell me more.
It's presented as one possible model for this kind of structural reconfiguration. Think of it as a layered, maybe cyclical system. Ideally, it starts right at the core, with the foundational vision of the company's founder.
The original why.
Exactly. That core vision then naturally informs the product's key value propositions.
What it offers.
Right. Then that shapes the overarching brand architecture, the consistent narrative voice the brand uses across all communications.
The brand personality.
And then finally, all of that guides how these core elements are expressed in specific, tailored ways across the various different platforms and touch points where you, the consumer, are actually present and interacting.
Ah, okay. So it's like having this really strong central core, the founder's vision, the core proposition, acting almost like gravity,
Yes, like a gravitational pull.
keeping everything else aligned and coherent, even as it branches out into all the complexities of the modern marketing landscape, the different platform, the different messages.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
It helps marketing teams navigate that complexity while still maintaining efficiency and a unified brand identity that you can actually recognize and connect with consistently.
It prevents things from just spinning off into chaos.
Hopefully, yes. Now, that's just one potential example, the gravitational structure. But the broader point for you is absolutely crucial. We can't just respond to consumer complexity by throwing more tactics at it or being on more platforms
They
randomly.
need structure.
You need to address that complexity with well-defined structures that provide clarity, coherence, and direction for your benefit. It's structure versus more chaos.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together then. This rise of China's spiritually middle class. It's not just some quirky trend we can file away.
Not at all. It's actually a really significant indicator, maybe even a reflection, of a much broader shift in the market reality that affects you directly.
What's the shift boiled down?
Consumers are increasingly dynamic. They exhibit these hybrid behaviors we talked about. Their choices are often driven more by emotions, context, specific scenarios.
And they're harder to pin down.
Much
Yeah.
harder to categorize neatly using those old labels.
And that fundamentally demands a shift in how businesses approach marketing to you, the consumer.
Absolutely. Their systems, their entire approach, needs to become just as dynamic, just as adaptive, and just as strategically grounded as the consumers they're trying to reach and understand. It has to mirror the reality.
So the final thought then, maybe, for you today, our listener, is this. Brands can't really control how consumers evolve. That's happening regardless.
Right. Consumer evolution is a given.
But they absolutely can make a conscious choice, a choice about whether they're going to equip themselves properly with the deep understanding, yes, but also with the systemic responses that are needed to effectively navigate this evolving reality.
It's about being prepared and structured for complexity.
Exactly, because the future in this landscape,
Hmm.
it probably won't belong to the brand that just shouts the loudest or relentlessly offers the absolute rock bottom price.
It's more nuanced than that.
It seems like it'll favor those who can genuinely find a consistent rhythm within all this uncertainty, those who can bring a sense of clarity and coherence to the increasing complexity.
Ultimately, moving beyond just trying to win on volume or price alone and connecting with you on a more meaningful, structurally sound level.
Finding rhythm and uncertainty, clarity and complexity, that's a good place to leave it.